On a Thursday, he made his entrance. It was a moment etched in my mind. I had just finished putting away the groceries when the front door creaked open, catching me off guard before I could even call out to my husband. I imagined it was him returning from the hardware store, but instead a tall, sunburnt man appeared clad in a denim jacket with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He carried a swagger that felt entirely foreign to anyone I had encountered in this house before. And then it dawned on me. It was indeed him, the young relative, developed whiter wiser. It had been years since he last appeared. The final moment I encountered him, he was a tall, awkward college student who struggled to meet my gaze and carried an overwhelming scent of cologne. Now he bore the marks of experience with lines at the corners of his eyes and arms that spoke of hard work. He smiled with an easy demeanor, yet there was a deeper narrative lurking beneath the surface. Not quite a lure, if that's what you mean. It was as if a subtle change enveloped the space, a silent acknowledgement of his presence the moment he stepped inside. Indeed, it had I acted as if it never happened. That has always been my talent after all. Imagine a fair and accurate scenario. My husband welcomed him with the familiar strength of character, a friendly pat on the back accompanied by a warm embrace. As I positioned myself to the side, I extended a courteous smile and presented a glass of water. I won't be offering any embraces. As he reached for the glass, our fingers nearly touched a fleeting moment that lingered in the air, and I observed right away that he maintained his gaze. His gaze held mine with an intensity that felt almost too bold, not unsuitable, not at this moment, but certainly not something to be overlooked. He was meant to linger for just a handful of days, a shift in career, a love that faded, a desire for a fresh start. The familiar courteous expressions that individuals employ to explain their withdrawal. My husband extended a warm invitation, sharing the guest room, handing over the shed keys and offering the car for weekend adventures. I provided fresh towels and a tranquil atmosphere. The initial days drifted by unremarkable and quiet. We maintained a courteous cadence. As dawn broke, he sprinted through the quiet streets bare-chested, lost in the rhythm of his playlist. I found myself baking far more than I ever had before, which felt quite ridiculous. I have no fondness for sugary treats, yet I found enjoyment in the diversion. He cherished the moment of rolling out the dough, the sound of his footsteps resonating on the porch outside. I convinced myself it was insignificant. Individuals observe one another. That's what it means to be human. Yet on the fourth day, I could no longer overlook how his presence altered the very atmosphere of the house. During dinner, he brought laughter to my husband, genuine, heartwarming laughter that resonated deep within me, a sound I had missed for far too long. My husband would gaze at me with a warmth that felt like a cherished tale, the kind you hold close for its comforting familiarity, known something you never anticipate parting with. I had transformed into a steadfast presence, the unwavering grip, the devoted partner. Yet in the background, I had also faded from view. The transformation lay elsewhere. It resided within me. I became more aware of my own presence. The moment I take to reflect before selecting a sweater. As I lingered a bit longer in front of the mirror, I observed the way my hair curled when it was still damp. Once I had a penchant for practical choices, but that week I felt a pull towards the forgotten black satin set, tucked away in a drawer, a treasure from 5 years past that had yet to see the light of day, simply for adornment. Simply to recall the emotions it stirred, and then came the moment in the bathroom. On that sticky afternoon, the air felt thick with unspoken tales waiting to unfold. As I made my way upstairs in search of my phone, the sound of the shower running caught my attention. The bathroom door stood ajar, a mere sliver of an opening, just a hint of mist on the mirror, and his jeans carelessly tossed in a heap by the sink. As I began to walk away, a sense of anticipation lingered in the air. I promise I did. But then the sound of the water ceased, and just as I was about to react, the door swung wide open. He lingered in the moment, a towel draped casually around his hips, droplets of water cascading down his chest like a shimmering tale waiting to be told. And for a fleeting moment, a moment that was impossible to ignore, he gazed at me as a man gazes at a woman, not a storyteller. Not a storyteller, a tale of a woman. I stood my ground. I remained silent. I remained completely still. As he strolled by, I felt the fleeting touch of his arm against mine, a moment that lingered in the air like an untold tale waiting to unfold. Silence enveloped him as he chose to remain unspoken. The quiet that enveloped us during dinner that night was overwhelming. My husband inquired about opportunities in Portland, inquired whether he intended to pursue romance once more. He responded with ease. Yet when I inquired if he required anything for his room, our gazes locked for a heartbeat longer than expected. He offered a subtle smile. He shook his head and replied, "No, all is well." The next words escaped my memory. Or if I shared any tales at all later that night as I lay next to my husband, I gazed at the ceiling, feeling as though my own skin had become a stranger to me. A part of me had been unveiled, softly without consent. Not desire, not at this moment a seemingly insignificant presence, yet it carries a threat far greater than meets the eye. Celebration. That was the tale, and the most unsettling part wasn't just the way he had gazed at me. I found myself reflecting on the past. The following morning, I ventured into my closet and retrieved that satin bra once more. It just happened without any intention on my part, not out of necessity. It was a moment I cherished, recalling the thrill of dressing with the hope that someone might take notice. And in that moment, I realized that the past had already woven its tale before the present even began. Not with a gentle caress, not with a gentle touch, with a fleeting look, and certain moments once witnessed linger in the mind forever. The following morning unfolded just like any other day. Yet there was an undeniable sense that my existence was anything but mundane. As I glided through the kitchen, I embraced a serene demeanor, placing mugs with care, slicing fruit with precision, and attuning my ears to the gentle hum of the refrigerator, as if the very absence of sound held a lurking threat. He entered the room a little behind schedule, with his hair still glistening from the moisture and his skin radiating warmth from the run he had just completed. He offered a nod to me with that same calm courage he hadn't possessed as a child. My husband had already set off for his day at work. Once upon a time, there was an early meeting that set the stage for a crucial shipment involving a contractor. The details of this encounter would weave together the threads of collaboration and anticipation. The details seemed to fade into the background for me. Recently, his presence in our home resonated like the rhythmic beat of a well-known tale, clear, practical, and entirely expected. He pressed his lips to my temple before departing, and I feigned indifference to the emptiness it stirred within me. There is an absence of warmth. There's no excitement, merely the gentle touch of routine. The nephew lingered at the counter, lost in the glow of his phone screen. "What tales shall we weave today?" I inquired. He simply shrugged as if the weight of the world rested lightly on his shoulders. I figured it was time to swing by the hardware store repair that wobbly hinge on the porch door. Naturally, he would. Every gesture from him lately carried an air of ease, strength, and a willingness to assist. And yet each movement seemed to carry a deeper meaning, a tale left untold. He toiled away under the sun for hours, while I busied myself with the cabinets, moving things around that hardly required any attention. Once upon a time, I found myself in a whimsical moment changing outfits, not once but twice, for reasons that danced just out of reach. Once upon a time, there was a pair of jeans and a tank top. Then there was a delicate dress with a gentle low back, a piece I hadn't donned since the summer of the year before last. It was one of those things you cling to, not for solace, but for the memories it evokes of your former self. As the clock struck 3, the heavens began to cloak themselves in shadows. A sudden summer storm bursting forth unexpectedly. The rain poured down with a fierce intensity, drumming against the windows while the light inside the house transformed. Wrapping everything in a gentle embrace, he entered drenched and chuckling softly as he dabbed his face with a cloth. He remarked, "That took me by surprise. Your presence is leaving traces all over my floor." He gazed at the puddle, then turned his eyes back to me. "Would you like me to perform a little reveal at the entrance?" It was a playful tale, a light-hearted, silly jest, yet it fell like a flicker upon parched earth. I spun around swiftly, feigning irritation concealing the warmth that crept up my neck. I shared with him the importance of keeping his shoes on the mat. I urged him to pick up a towel. I shared many thoughts that didn't quite capture what I truly meant to express. That fleeting instant slipped away. Yet there remains a part that is untouched. As the storm faded into the distance and the aroma of damp soil lingered in the atmosphere, he extended a hand to assist with dinner preparations. I allowed him to proceed. He skillfully sliced through the vibrant vegetables, each cut telling a tale of flavor and freshness. I prepared a delicious grilled chicken dish. Twice our arms grazed against each other. I offered my apologies one time. He remained silent on both occasions. The kitchen seemed to shrink in size compared to how it felt the previous night. As the meal reached its perfect state, the night had already wrapped the world in its embrace. As we gathered on the porch to share a meal, the storm had brought a refreshing chill, easing the oppressive heat. "Just a bit?" I filled my glass with wine once more, despite not really needing it. He reclined in his chair, gazing at the sky, and mused. "Have you ever considered doing something wild just to truly feel alive?" I took my time before responding. I just experienced a tale unfold. The way his jaw tightened as he took a swallow. "It all hinges on your interpretation of reckless," I replied. He shifted his gaze in my direction. Once more, it appeared before me, the charged silence that lingers in the air between us. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" He recounted. The porch lights danced in the twilight as a gentle breeze whispered through the trees. "Please don't say things like that," I whispered. "What's stopping us?" He inquired without a hint of defiance. He inquired with unwavering confidence, as if he possessed the knowledge all along. And then the tale unfolded. Without a hint of caution, no planned introduction, he leaned across the small table, his hand gently cradling my jaw, and pressed his lips against mine. It wasn't a matter of urgency. It lacked any hostility. The pace was unhurried. It was as though we had to experience it first to truly understand before making any further choices. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Could not resist, our lips collided a moment unclouded by doubt. In that moment, calmness prevailed. In that instant, there was no remorse, just warmth, a longing that had gone unfulfilled for years. And then I stepped back, not because I lacked desire, but because my longing was overwhelming. I sprang to my feet, nearly toppling the wine glass in the process. The rhythm of my heart pounded in my chest, echoing like a drum, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the neighbors might catch wind of it. "I must take my leave," I declared. "I'm not quite sure what the reason is." I had just arrived back at my place. I departed from him on the porch and ascended the stairs with a fierce determination. Not from embarrassment, but from recollection, from feeling, from the understanding that my lips recalled him more vividly than they had my husband in many months. As I gazed into the mirror, the reflection staring back felt like a stranger. My cheeks were aglow. My collarbone danced as if it had just completed a long journey. As I peeled away each layer, the moment felt like a gentle unfolding of a narrative. Every layer unfolds like a revelation. I lingered in the shower for 15 minutes, the water scorching against my skin, attempting to wash away something that felt intangible. That night, my husband lay next to me as he always did, his mouth slightly ajar, arms perfectly arranged. The ceiling captured my gaze once more, not with trepidation, with precision. It became clear to me at this moment that was a moment etched in time, one that I couldn't erase. not due to having reached an irreversible moment, but because I had experienced the sweetness of being desired, completely, in a straightforward manner, unchangeably. I just couldn't bear to let that go. Not at this moment. The morning after that kiss was like stepping into a new chapter of a tale yet to be told. I navigated the morning with care, pouring coffee into my cup, each drop a reminder of the familiar rhythms that ground me in reality. My husband lingered by the sink, absorbed in his phone, his presence a familiar backdrop to our everyday life. He shot me a quick look and mentioned he had to take a moment to check on the sprinkler system before diving into his tasks. I nodded, feigning understanding. The quiet lingered in my ears, a soundless echo of something I had yet to experience. As I glanced at the window, my own reflection met my gaze. With hair gently tousled and a neckline that drapes effortlessly, there's a sense of narrative woven into the fabric of the moment. A warmth spread across my cheeks unrelated to the bright morning sun. The sensation lingered on my lips, a reminder not of a physical connection, but of a vivid recollection. It lingered in my mind, a persistent presence that I couldn't shake off, weaving itself into the fabric of my memories. I had stepped into a realm unseen by others, yet palpable with each inhale I took. And the most challenging aspect, I felt no remorse. Not quite. What I experienced was a deep yearning, not for turmoil or trickery, but for that vivid, piercing consciousness I believed I had left behind in my 20s. As I strolled by the window, I caught a glimpse of him already outside. With the sun shining down, I found myself once more with my shirt off, hammer in hand, as I worked to secure a loose board on the fence. He arched his back. With every gesture, I stayed there longer than necessary, gripping a dish towel as if it were my only protection. The day unfolded in a haze of gentle, lingering instances. Once upon a time, I found myself in a culinary mishap where lunch turned into a charred memory. In another moment, I accidentally unleashed a cascade of detergent, creating a bubbly chaos. And then there was that curious instance when I entered a room only to be greeted by the blankness of forgotten intentions. Yet I was fully aware of what I was steering clear of being in his presence because I doubted my ability to keep the door from swinging open even further this time. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the windows, I found myself alone in the house after my husband departed for a meeting across town. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me, on the stairs, stirring a sense of intrigue and anticipation. As I stood in the hallway, mindlessly folding laundry that hardly required it, his voice drifted in low and uncomfortably near. "It seems you've been keeping your distance from me." I chose to keep my gaze forward. I just completed the task of making a towel perfectly smooth. My hands quivered just a bit, yet I maintained my stance, serene as if that would quell the blaze within me. In that moment, our lips met, sealing a connection that spoke volumes without a single word. It was a kiss that told a tale of longing and desire, a fleeting yet profound exchange that lingered in the air around us. "That doesn't imply it signifies something," he interjected. I turned then slowly, our eyes meeting in a silence so deep it felt like it could engulf us. "You are the nephew of my husband, and you are his partner in life. Who do you believe bears a greater burden?" I ought to have intervened at that moment. Perhaps I ought to have strolled by him, retreating into the comfort of my familiar patterns. However, I chose not to. I entered the guest room and closed the door, seeking solitude to gather my thoughts. He chose not to follow. That was the challenge. He didn't pursue me like they do in the films. He remained still, composed, resting against the railing, observing me as if he were etching my actions into his memory. Such a level of patience is not typically found in young lads. That kind of silence is found in those who grasp the weight of their choices, yet willingly embrace the unknown. That night at dinner, everything felt flat. The food, the wine, the conversation. My husband chuckled at a joke from the radio and turned to our nephew to share some thoughts on job interviews. He responded with grace. I found moments to share a smile. Yet I found myself outside the room. I found myself lingering on that staircase, caught in that fleeting look. As I picked up the plates, I caught a whiff of his cologne lingering on the back of the chair. It was subtle, warm, woodsy, unfamiliar. The kind of scent that felt out of place in our home, yet it lingered as if it had always been a part of our lives, weaving through the corners of our rooms. I retired early, citing a headache as my excuse. My husband gently offered me a painkiller, his lips brushing against my shoulder in a tender moment. I nodded, swallowed hard, shut my eyes, and feigned slumber. The gentle creaking of the house whispered secrets, while the ceiling fan hummed a mechanical lullaby. At a certain moment, it struck me that I was still adorned in the black satin bra I had slipped on that morning. Perhaps I hadn't truly overlooked it, or maybe I had choosing to keep it on for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. In the stillness of the night just after the clock struck midnight, I sensed a presence stirring in the hallway. Deliberate, thoughtful strides. I remained still. I absorbed every word. They lingered at my door for a moment, then moved on toward the kitchen. The water flowed gracefully, a piece of furniture that holds secrets and memories within its doors, shut tight. A refrigerator sighed as its door swung wide, and once more there was quiet. It had evolved beyond the kiss. It was the beginning of all that followed. With each inhale, each decision, the moment I began to keep an eye on the clock, anticipating his return from errands. As I stood at the threshold, I took a moment to smooth out my blouse, ensuring every detail was just right before stepping inside. The way my skin recalled his closeness more vividly than any moment shared with my husband in months. Yet I found myself not reaching out to him once more. Yet deep down, I felt the inevitability of it all. Not in the way a tempest would, not in the manner of destiny, as if seeking approval, a gift I had long denied myself. As I finally drifted off, the final image that lingered in my mind was the gentle touch of his hand against the door frame just moments before. Laid back, hardly discernible, but that's all for now. In that fleeting, seemingly insignificant instant, a chilling realization washed over me. I craved more than just another kiss from him. I felt the urge to return his kiss with intention. The days that came after seemed to blur together, losing their distinctiveness. They drifted by like scattered pieces of a larger tale, cut off fragments of a life that slipped through my fingers. The morning routine unfolded just as it always had. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafts through the air, the sound of the garage door echoing as my husband drove away. The gentle murmur of the news station fills the air, yet the quiet that lingered in the gaps had taken on a new hue. The tranquility had vanished. It pulsed with anticipation, vibrant, nearly lyrical in its pain. He remained within the walls of the house, continuing to navigate through it as if it were his own, intertwined with our shared experience, and perhaps it does now in ways my partner could never grasp. I observed how he rested against the door frames. He balanced mugs of coffee in one hand while holding a book in the other. In the stillness of the night, he found himself nestled in the living room, a quiet observer of the shadows dancing around him, with the lamp glowing softly, shirt discarded, legs extended as if this moment were a fleeting existence where he could take root. I navigated around him with the carefulness of a storyteller crafting a plot twist. It wasn't that I didn't desire his presence. Rather, I was all too aware of the consequences that would unfold if I crossed that boundary once more. There was a moment when I found myself fixing my hair just before stepping into the same space as him, and I couldn't help but feel a rush from the sheer simplicity of that gesture. It had been ages since I had put together an outfit for a man. I chose my outfit with care, to be woven into a narrative, to be embraced. Now I adorned myself in ways that ensured I lingered in the minds of others. One afternoon, I ventured outside to take a look at the plants on the back patio. To my surprise, he appeared before me, and for a fleeting instant, I found myself completely still. He sat on the steps, his elbows propped up as he gazed into the distance. on his knees with a cigarette dangling from his fingers, a hidden habit revealed at last. At first, his gaze remained fixed downward. Have you ever pondered what tales others might weave about us? I chose to remain quiet. The breeze danced playfully at the edge of the tablecloth. In the quiet of the afternoon, the distant hum of a lawnmower filled the air, weaving a backdrop for the tales waiting to unfold. Then he faced me. His eyes lacked a sense of whimsy. They were profound, exploring, but not for validation. He mentioned that if anyone had the knowledge, I settled in position just right, neither too near nor too distant. It was hard to tell whether it stemmed from a spirit of rebellion or a thirst for knowledge. Perhaps a combination of the two. I pondered over the words I would share with myself. I replied. At last he smiled, yet there was no joy in it. It was even more shadowy than that. He tossed the cigarette into a coffee can, rose to his feet, and stretched as if the atmosphere surrounding us wasn't alive with energy. Fear not, he reassured. I won't be kissing you again, only if you invite me to. As he stepped through the door, I was left standing there, my heart racing wildly beneath my chest. That evening, we found ourselves at a neighborhood gathering, an event my husband was eager for us to join. Picture a summer gathering where the air is filled with the aroma of grilled delights, and each guest arrives with their signature potato salad nestled in glass bowls. Conversations flow effortlessly as the topic of lawn care takes center stage, treated with the reverence of a sacred tradition. As I stepped into the backyard, a wave of vulnerability washed over me despite my simple attire. It wasn't the dress that caught my attention, but rather the sensation of eyes lingering on my back, a feeling that enveloped me even before I turned to see who was watching. He stood there chuckling with a couple of women from down the street, a beer bottle casually gripped in his hand. He had the kind of presence that seemed to leap from the frame, a figure comfortable in the gaze of others. And then he noticed my presence. His smile wavered for a moment, then blossomed back to life as though it had never dimmed. We glided through the gathering like celestial bodies gracefully avoiding collision, maintaining our distance, yet I sensed his presence. Each gesture, each moment of stillness, every glance averted and then returned when the world seemed oblivious. It was utterly infuriating. At one moment, my husband slipped away into the house to lend a hand with the beverages. There I stood by the hedge, solitude enveloping me as I inhaled through the fabric of my dress, hoping it would bring a sense of relief from the heat. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reached my ears. It wasn't him, not at all. The culprit turned out to be the neighbor. Once upon a time, there was a character named Marcia, or perhaps Margie, or something along those lines. Her smile stretched across her face, hinting at secrets she held close, revealing a depth beyond the surface. With a sideways glance at the porch where he lingered, plate of ribs in hand, she remarked, "He's your husband's nephew, isn't he?" I nodded with intention. As she held the glass delicately, the rich aroma of the wine enveloped her senses, inviting her to savor each moment. Fascinating the way his gaze meets yours. As I stood there, I sensed a subtle shift in the ground beneath me. "He's just quite the character," I remarked, trying to keep things upbeat. She let out a soft laugh. "Well, that's certainly one way to put it." And then she drifted off, her words lingering in the thick, warm air like a silent alarm unnoticed by those around her. As the evening wore on and the last of the guests departed, leaving the house enveloped in its familiar stillness, I found myself at the kitchen sink washing the wine glasses with a sense of reflection. His arrival was silent, slipping in unnoticed. I was completely unaware of his presence in the room until I sensed it, a warmth behind me, reminiscent of the heat radiating from a stove. He spoke softly, observing the way her gaze lingered on you. I chose not to look back. It seems she might have an inkling of what's going on. I extended my hand towards a towel. My hands shook and I despised how clear it was to everyone around me. I despised even more the longing that urged me to pivot to bridge the distance that lay between us. I remarked that she is completely unaware, and then he edged forward, drawing nearer. Nor do you. The space that separated us felt fragile, as if one could easily slip right through it. And yet I clung to it, in a way that is hard to explain. Yet my breath let me down. Superficial, wobbly, he kept his distance. He held back. He simply remained still, allowing me to sense every silent thought lingering in the space that separated us. And with that, he stepped out of the room, leaving behind a lingering silence. That night, I found myself wide awake, consumed not only by guilt or longing, but also by a deep-seated fear. It was a haunting realization, the way I had grown to yearn for something I had painstakingly trained myself to forgo over the years. It transcended love, rebellion, and danger. It was about the profound experience of being recognized and the chilling understanding that once someone truly perceives you, there's no returning to the shadows of anonymity. It was an ordinary morning, the kind that held no special fanfare as the journey was about to unfold. My husband had departed at dawn long before I stirred from my slumber, his schedule affixed to the refrigerator in his distinct bold script. Once upon a time, there was a journey to a client located 2 towns away, followed by an important conference call back at the office. It was of no consequence. What truly counted was that the house was mine alone, yet I found myself not alone, by oneself. The notion emerged in a relaxed manner initially, once I shared that I had to make a little journey to a shop in a nearby city, just a swift drive to drop off a few items and return home. He suggested joining me, mentioning it could be refreshing to leave the house and enjoy a little walk. I ought to have declined. Every fiber of my being was aware of that. However, I chose not to. I nodded and replied with a surety that belied the tempest brewing within my chest. Silence enveloped us as we journeyed along the road. The stillness hung in the air, comfortable and unforced. With one arm extended out the window, the wind danced through his shirt sleeve. Sunglasses perched on his nose, and his lips formed a line that whispered both silence and 1,000 unspoken tales. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, each breath deliberate and steady. Every mile unfurled like a thread connecting us, the strain intensifying with each marker we encountered. The shop held no significance. I couldn't recount the items we purchased or exchanged, nor could I say if we engaged in conversation with anyone. It served as a mere facade, a distraction for the inevitable that loomed over us both. As we strolled back to the car, he gazed up at the sky and remarked, "Looks like rain." It simply did not. The atmosphere was unmistakably clear, dry, and warm, yet his tone conveyed something deeper than just the weather. We traveled in quiet once more until I veered away from the main road. He glanced my way, silent yet expressive, his brow arching ever so slightly. The path tightened, winding gracefully. It was a place etched in my memory from years past, a roadside motel nestled behind a diner, the sort of establishment that had thrived long before the era of chain hotels turned everything sterile and expected. I drove in lost in thought, or perhaps I pondered it so deeply that the moment of action seemed destined to happen. I convinced myself that a break was necessary, that my body was signaling fatigue, and that we could unwind over a drink at the diner while the traffic eased up. That was the tale. I spun around the truth, like a delicate silk scarf, gentle and soothing, yet utterly clear. He trailed behind me into the lobby, curiosity evident in his every step. Only serious matters, no lightheartedness. Our gazes never met. I settled the bill with cash. The room was chilled by the air conditioner, a biting cold that heightened the awareness of every inch of skin. The curtains hung closed, shrouding the room in mystery. The bedspread displayed a design that failed to capture my attention. I set my bag down on the chair and found myself standing in the center of the room, much like a character who had lost her lines in a script she had crafted herself. He remained silent at the beginning. I shared my experiences. It was a mistake to lead us to this place. He moved in a little nearer, not all at once, not in a grand way. It was so near that I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. "I never wanted to be here," he remarked. That was the reality of it all. He simply hadn't. He had just uttered a simple yes. And then the quiet enveloped us once more, electric, comforting, and utterly undeniable. I averted my gaze. My hands quivered ever so slightly as I pulled open the drawer beside the bed, as if I were on a quest to uncover some long-lost guide on how to embody the essence of goodness. As I shut the door, I felt his presence looming just behind me. I stood my ground. I remained still. His voice carried a hushed intensity, measured and deliberate. "You have no obligations to me." "I understand," I mentioned. "So, what brings us to this moment?" I chose to remain silent. I took a moment to pause, settling myself on the edge of the bed. My legs were heavy and my throat was parched. I had always been the kind of woman who steered clear of such adventures, and yet here I found myself. He knelt before me, his hands resting softly on my knees, not in a way that claimed or dominated, but with the tenderness of someone handling something delicate, not due to the possibility of breaking, but because it was already broken. This kiss carried certainty, a declaration rather than an inquiry. It was a revelation to all the untold tales that linger in silence. In every instance, I maintained my composure, even as my inner self yearned to break free. It unfolded at its own pace. It lacked caution, yet it wasn't without purpose either. It was exact, purposeful. He kissed me as if the moment had been building up for ages, not for just an instant, but for a signal that he was permitted to desire me. And I kissed him back, not out of weakness, confusion, or a sense of being lost, but because for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly chosen unclaimed, not designated, free from promises etched in time, their significance long since diminished, but selected in a manner that allows your skin to recall the essence of being, more than merely functional. In the quiet moments that followed, we remained still lost in our thoughts, next to each other, untouched. It didn't happen. Of embarrassment yet, the act of touching would have signified a journey forward. We found ourselves unprepared for what was to come, not at this moment, not at that time. The atmosphere surrounding us crackled with an indescribable energy. No remorse. That's not quite right. It carried a weight beyond mere words, something genuine. He faced me, his voice rough and strained. "I'm not looking to take anything away from you. I just didn't respond, because deep down I sensed he had already woven a narrative, not about my marriage, not about my loyalty, yet something more subdued, a deeper essence awaits. He had claimed the piece of me that once held on to the notion of being invulnerable." Once more we journeyed home wrapped in quietude, yet this stillness held a unique weight. It was brimming with life, vibrant, and I understood without uttering a word that my life had irrevocably changed. Everything remained the same, and all that unfolded. The house welcomed me with the nostalgic creak of the floorboards and the comforting hum of the air conditioner, each sound weaving a tale of memories long past. My slippers lingered by the doorway, as though I had just popped out for a quick errand. The fridge still displayed my husband's to-do list, along with his favorite items. The mug rested rinsed and turned upside down in the sink, waiting for its next tale to unfold. All things appeared just as they ever did, and yet everything seemed out of place. Within me, a change had occurred that was irreversible. It was neither remorse nor fear that gripped the heart. It was nearer to understanding. An unmistakable, eerie realization washed over me as I found myself in a version of my being that was entirely unfamiliar. Once upon a time, there was existence. I uncovered a hidden layer I never realized was there, and now it stubbornly resisted returning to its rightful position. I glided silently through the house, each step a whisper in the stillness. "There's nothing to conceal." He likely wouldn't have seen it at all. My husband was so immersed in the cadence of his daily life, so convinced of the reality he had constructed, that he failed to notice the quiet shifts in my hesitations, in my stillness, in the moments I spent lingering by the sink or gazing into the void. I prepared an abundance of dishes, thoughtfully organizing my meals in advance. I shared with him my struggles with headaches and my restless nights. These tales were only partially accurate. Slumber had transformed into a mere shadow of tranquility. It was a never-ending tapestry of recollections that had come uninvited. The sensation of breath against my collarbone, the warmth of skin that lingered in my memory, the heaviness of a gaze that had unraveled something deep within me. As darkness enveloped the room, I felt the familiar warmth of my husband's hand on my back, a comforting presence that had always been there, yet my body remained unresponsive. It endured, it persisted through the ages. His affection had transformed into a mere act devoid of purpose, akin to the routine of shaking hands or offering a casual bless you to someone unknown. Gentle, instinctive, vacant, he made an effort. That was the most challenging moment. He put in a genuine effort. He sensed the space between us and filled it with vibrant oranges from the market, with plush towels arranged perfectly in the linen closet, with gentle hints that we might consider a weekend getaway. Only the two of us. Yet he wasn't reaching the part of me that had faded away. The moment that stirred to life in that motel room in a kiss that lingered in my heart far longer than it did on my lips. The nephew he had transformed as well. Though not on the surface, he continued to glide through the house with a relaxed grace, leaving behind half-finished glasses on the counter, always ready to bring in the groceries or mend the dripping faucet. Yet within him there lingered a stillness that had never existed prior. There was a certain intensity in the way he regarded me, as if each glance was a careful measurement, a constant weighing of the moment, deliberating whether to share his thoughts or remain silent. Gone were the days of laughter, the light-hearted banter, and the mischievous looks exchanged between us. Instead, we existed in a quiet that hummed within the quiet. A tension lingered, a delicate connection that felt as if it could snap at any moment. One afternoon, I stumbled upon him in the garage, his hands busy with a rag, the hood of my husband's car propped open, revealing the secrets within. It was as if he had slipped in quietly unnoticed by anyone. He glanced upward, pausing for just a heartbeat. He remained silent. Then, with a serious expression, he inquired, "How are you doing?" After days of silence, he finally chose to speak to me directly. I parted my lips to speak, yet silence enveloped me, not due to a lack of words, but rather an uncertainty in expressing the truth that I felt like a woman divided, that my body still recalled the contour of his jaw, the warmth of his breath, the way his hands had discovered the tender spots I had long since forgotten. Instead, I replied, "I'm doing well." With a single nod, he shifted his focus back to the engine. Later that evening, I made another attempt with my partner. I settled next to him on the couch, feeling his arm drape over my shoulder, and I found myself pondering what it might be like to desire that warmth once more. He pressed his lips to my temples softly, whispering something about a film. I leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of a heart that had cherished me through the years. Yet there was an emptiness within me. I felt no anger. I felt perfectly warm. I was not present. It wasn't that my feelings for him were absent. It became clear that I had outgrown the part of me that had constructed a life entirely focused on earning his affection. As I endeavored to find my way back to her, I found myself enveloped in gentle fabrics. Sweaters prepared his favorite dishes, shared tales of errands and the neighbor's dog. The more I understood she wasn't returning. The woman who had agreed to share a motel room was someone familiar. Her existence was intentional. She reflected the world around her. Once I gazed upon her face, it became an image forever etched in my mind. The unfolding took its time, revealing layers gradually. It arrived in pieces delicate enough to elude a single origin, yet persistent enough to demand attention. I had managed to persuade. I remind myself that the events in that motel room can be tucked away into the annals of history. That longing could be stored away like off-season garments, tucked away until the echoes of the past dimmed and the familiar rhythm of life resumed. Yet I've come to understand that desire remains unyielding. It unfolds. It seeps through fleeting looks, through the soft shuffle of feet, through whispered breaths. I put in more effort than ever to maintain the facade. In the kitchen, I listened closely to my husband's lengthy tales about work embodying the kindness that had always defined me. With meticulous attention, I arranged the bed, ensuring the pillows were positioned just as he preferred, and yet none of it found its way to an aspect of my being that seemed genuine now. It felt like I was inhabiting a character I had long since left behind. He was completely unaware of what was unfolding around him. Or if he had, he chose not to inquire. That's how enduring partnerships often unfold. Truths are felt but not expressed, not out of fear, but because there is so much to lose in the inquiry. The quiet that lingered between my nephew and me had grown too heavy to bear. It was not a quietude born from embarrassment or withdrawal. The air was thick with an unspoken weight, a quiet that held its breath waiting for the inevitable to unfold. We steered clear of solitude in enclosed spaces. Our conversation was grounded in the tangible and the real everyday tasks, plans, and to-dos, and yet each word we exchanged came wrapped in an intricate tapestry of recollections. The memory of his lips lingering on my throat danced in my mind as he casually inquired about the milk supply. The memory of his hand resting on my hip lingered as he passed me the car keys. Everything we did was perfectly acceptable. That's what deepened the struggle. We followed the rules flawlessly, that is until we decided to break free. On a Thursday, the familiar event unfolded once more. My husband had a remarkable experience that unfolded in a way that captivated everyone around us. It was a moment filled with unexpected twists and heartfelt emotions, leaving us all eager to share the details and relive the magic of that day, departed ahead of schedule for a night away at a conference. Something local, easily overlooked. The house seemed to breathe anew in his absence, the walls shedding their tension like a sigh of relief. As I was in the laundry room meticulously folding towels, I suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of the front door creaking open. He uttered my name, his tone laced with an unsettling nonchalance. I responded without looking back. Here we are again. He lingered in the doorway, arms folded, his face a canvas of mystery. Once upon a time, there came a moment just. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts before speaking. It seems like there's something important we should discuss. The words lingered in the air, a weighty presence that filled the space between us. I nodded slowly, my gaze fixed elsewhere. With deliberate care, I folded yet another towel, each crease measured and intentional. When our gazes finally locked, I encountered an unexpected surprise. Calmness, not remorse, not irritation, a sense of stillness. It was as though he had been engaged in a long battle and had at last decided to cease the struggle. There was a long silence between us. Then he expressed, "I've been making an effort to show respect, to allow you your own space. Yet I feel like I'm unraveling." I took a deep breath, my fingers clutching the edge of the table behind me. "I understand," I mentioned. It marked the first genuine exchange between us in weeks. He moved in a little closer, then took another step forward. Yet it unfolded without haste, merely a matter of time. "You occupy my thoughts endlessly," he murmured. "I understand," I said it again. And then our lips met. I'm uncertain about who took the initial step. I can't quite recall whether my hands discovered his face or if his lips discovered my treasure. What I do know is that the kiss carried a different essence this time, one that transcended mere allure. It felt like the end of everything, like two souls at last embracing the reality they had danced around for far too long. It unfolded at its own pace. It wasn't a matter of urgency. It unfolded at a leisurely pace. Purposeful, exquisitely personal. His hands found their place on my waist, a softness that seemed to weave a tale of intimacy, admiration. Mine nestled into his shirt as if seeking something to cling to. In the stillness of the room, silence enveloped everything. Silence reigns, focused solely on the narrative, just the sound of our breathing and the soft creak of the floor as we inched nearer. In a moment of stillness, he halted, his forehead gently touching mine as we both surrendered to the quiet, our eyes softly shut. "It seems we've crossed a threshold, haven't we?" he inquired. I chose to remain silent. It was simply because we were, and for the first time, I felt a sense of freedom in not caring what that meant. The remainder of the day passed quietly, each moment a canvas, waiting for a tale to be woven into its fabric. It's not chilly. There's no need for embarrassment, completely satisfied. The kind of stillness that comes after the ground has trembled, not due to a lack of words, but rather because all that needs to be expressed has already been conveyed through gestures, voices, and the rhythm of our hearts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stepped into the shower and transformed. I gazed at my reflection in the mirror draped in a towel, hair damp, lips plump. I appeared more vibrant than I had in years, not captivating, not vibrant simply here. As I stepped into the living room, I found him engrossed in a book. He glanced upward, caught my gaze, and remained silent. It wasn't necessary. Later that night, as I lay in bed alone, my mind wandered through the vivid tales of my past. With my partner still absent, the home resonates with its own serene cadence. I embarked on a journey to uncover the essence of my emotions. It was not love, not in the usual way. It wasn't desire either, though, that hung in the air like the last embers of a fading flame. It felt like a taste of liberation and also something far more sinister, as I discovered the journey to freedom comes with its own costs, and I found myself in a moment where inked the agreement with my essence. 3 days passed before he took his leave. In the absence of any formalities, the moment unfolded quietly. There are no clashes. It was a brief exchange during breakfast where he and my husband spoke of an out-of-state job opportunity, a friend with an extra room, and the possibilities that lay ahead to begin anew. He averted his gaze as he spoke, yet the unspoken truth lingered heavily in the air, wrapping around each word like a shroud. I lingered by the sink, wiping a plate that was already dry, feigning attention, masking the deep ache that had taken root in my chest while I slept. He chose to remain, though I hadn't requested it. He chose to go on his own accord. I remained silent, not uttering a word. Perhaps that was the reason for the pain. At times, the absence of words can echo like neglect, especially after experiencing the depth of understanding from another soul. My husband, pleased with the narrative, gave him a hearty pat on the back and expressed his comprehension. It was a fortunate moment that all individuals requires a refresh from time to time. I choked down the acrid taste that threatened to spill over. A fresh beginning, as if we were merely machines in need of a reboot, as if the echoes of the past could simply vanish because someone chose to turn their back. By midday, he had vanished. Once upon a time, there was a room that stood silent and still, devoid of any presence. Once upon a time, the bed sheets lay neatly folded, a testament to the care taken in the room. The closet has been emptied, and yet the atmosphere still embraced him. The aroma he carried, his warmth, the sound of joy that once filled the air. I never permitted myself to truly find humor in that. As I approached the door, I found myself circling it 3 times, gathering my thoughts before finally crossing the threshold. It appeared just as it always had, unchanged since his arrival, as if the world had simply turned a page, leaving behind the echoes of what once was. Yet I was aware of the truth. I found myself in the middle of the room, gazing at the wall, my heart feeling empty. wrestling with the emotions of grief and relief. It was a blend of both. On that particular night, slumber eluded me. As I rested next to my husband, his breaths coming in soft waves, the television cast a gentle glow on the wall, its colors dancing quietly in the dim light. I observed his features, the well-known curve of his nose, the subtle flicker in his brow, as he drifted into slumber. He had always been the one to weave tales that captivated the imagination, drawing listeners into worlds filled with wonder and adventure, seemed serene in slumber, believing exposed in a manner he never allowed himself to be while conscious. And I loathed the chasm I had forged within myself, not due to any wrongdoing, but because it seemed beyond the point of no return. It felt as if an unseen thread connecting us had finally worn thin, unraveling beyond mending. In the stillness, there was a quiet absence of marks, no loud accusations echoing through the air, and no shattered dishes to tell of conflict. Only this silent, excruciating break. I felt a strong urge to connect with him, to place my hand upon his chest and sense the gentle rhythm of his breath, to hold on to the memories of the man I once said, "I do." Yet my body remained still. My arm lay immobilized by a reality too burdensome to bear. As the sun rose, he caught me off guard with an unexpected proposal: 2 plane tickets for a weekend escape. He had orchestrated it in silence, believing that perhaps the solitude would weave us back together once more. The warmth of it overwhelmed me more than any charge ever could, for it wasn't the fury that I dreaded. It was a tale of love truthful, weary. A love that withstands the test of time. I acknowledged him with a nod and expressed my gratitude. I didn't agree. Instead, I shared that I required some time to myself. I had been experiencing a sense of being overwhelmed, feeling emotionally drained. Perhaps it would be better for him to embark on this journey alone. He found clarity within himself. He had a great time. He paused for a moment, then nodded, perhaps feeling a sense of relief at the chance to unwind. He pressed his lips gently to my forehead before departing, urging me to take some time to rest. He promised to reach out once he touched down. As the door clicked shut behind him, I held back my tears. As I lingered in the stillness, my gaze drifted out the window, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity. The scene beyond appeared as if time had stood still. Freshly cut lawns, the sound of sprinklers hissing fills the air. Delivery trucks roll by, their presence barely acknowledged. Yet within me, everything felt displaced from its original place. I ascended the stairs and pulled open the drawer where I had stashed away the bra I donned that day in the motel. Dark, smooth fabric that whispers elegance. Delicate bands. A piece of clothing that once filled me with strength, unassailable. Now it seemed like a fragment from a chapter of my life that felt distant and unfamiliar. I ran my fingers over the fabric, allow it to drift away from my grasp. With a tender touch, it was folded and set to rest in the trash, not due to any remorse for the events that unfolded, but rather because I found no need for a keepsake to hold on to those memories. As the sun began to set, I strolled through the neighborhood, taking in the sights and sounds around me. The sidewalks radiated warmth under my sandals. I exchanged nods with neighbors, offered smiles at the right moments, and waved to the cars that drove by. I navigated the routines of everyday life with the meticulousness of someone intent on keeping secrets hidden. And yet, a deep yearning within me craved to be unveiled. I envisioned a scene where someone inquired simply, "Are you okay?" Not in a courteous manner. In reality, path the kind that uncovers hidden truths, the kind that patiently seeks the truth, regardless of how much time it requires to unfold. It seems like there was no inquiry made. It seems that such things are rarely done. As the evening unfolded, I filled a glass with wine and settled into the tranquility of the garden. The fragrance of jasmine lingered in the coolness of the approaching evening. The sound of cicadas filled the air. The soft, rhythmic sound of a lawnmower echoes in the distance. I shut my eyes, seeking to remember the precise instant when everything started to fall apart. Could it have been the fleeting look exchanged in the corridor? The wet cloth gripped tightly in his hands. What about the kiss, or had it begun long before? In the hushed gathering moments that lie between my former self and the person I have evolved into. Deep within, I understood that this was not solely about him. Not quite, he was the catalyst. For years, I had been like dry wood, and now with the match struck, all that remained was to burn quietly. Time drifted by, and I lost count of the days time seemed to twist and turn in unexpected ways after he departed. Each day unfolded like the last. The aroma of morning coffee fills the air, accompanied by the gentle hum of appliances. My husband's voice rings through with phone calls, sharing updates on the weather and discussing our grocery lists. Yet the cadence of my existence had transformed into a more languid, weighty tempo. It felt like I was submerged, navigating through my responsibilities while trying to stay afloat. There were no letters exchanged, no calls made, and I chose to remain silent as well. It wasn't that I lacked the desire. Rather, I was apprehensive about what it would signify to acknowledge even internally that his absence resonated more deeply than that of others. Connection. I convinced myself it was just a phase, that the intensity would fade, and that eventually I would become the person who could navigate through entire seasons without the desire for validation. Yet she never returned. Instead, I navigated the days like someone who had just come back from battle, acutely aware of the delicate nature of tranquility, how silence can turn oppressive once you've experienced the depth of genuine understanding. My husband noticed, but not in the way that truly counted. He noticed how I was feeling extended, a hand with little chores, and checked in more frequently to see if I was okay. I gave a gentle nod, pressed a kiss to his cheek, and assured him that all was well. And at times I found myself nearly convinced by my own words. Yet there were evenings, when the breeze brought a profound quiet through the panes, when I would rest in bed and sense that haunting, piercing awareness that I had unraveled something that could never be completely mended. It wasn't the deed itself. It was the beginning of a new chapter. My existence had been one of order, intention, and security, a journey woven with synchronized schedules, cherished meals, two identical toothbrushes, and a glass resting by the sink. My heart had been intertwined with my husband's profoundly. In a sense, I continued to do so. Yet, the love we once shared now resembled a cherished relic, meticulously kept, seldom engaged with, appreciated more for its past glory than for its present reality. One morning, I opened my closet and found myself gazing at the clothes that once adorned my body without a second thought. Soft cardigans, breezy cotton dresses, and slacks in comforting hues. Everything appeared recognizable, yet none of it resonated as belonging to me. I slipped into a white blouse, tucked it neatly, only to peel it off. Moments later, I slipped into a summer dress, but then decided to take it off as well. At last, I slipped into a pair of jeans and an old concert shirt, a relic from a night I had long since tucked away in memory. A fabric with worn-out edges softened by countless washes over time. As I gazed into the mirror, reflections of moments danced before my eyes. The woman in the mirror was unfamiliar, yet for the first time in weeks, I met her gaze without hesitation. She appeared weary yet sincere, bare of pretense. As the day unfolded, I found myself stepping into the guest room, the very space he had once called his own. I had not stepped inside. It has been since the morning he departed. All remained as it should be. The window opened slightly, allowing the scent of freshly mowed grass to drift in, while the extra blanket lay neatly at the foot of the bed, and a subtle impression remained on the mattress. From where he once rested, I settled into my familiar spot and let my eyelids fall shut. A narrative unfolded without a clear vision. No tale unfolded itself. The weight of the moment hung heavy. The significance of the decision I had taken loomed large. Time and time again, with each step I took toward him, I chose to embrace the moment rather than turn away. It dawned on me at that moment I hadn't betrayed my marriage. It was never about a loss of love for my husband. I turned away from it because the love I once had for my true self faded away. That afternoon, I let the laundry wait. Once upon a time, the vacuum sat quietly in the corner, waiting for its moment to shine, but alas, it was not called upon that day. I chose to remain silent, letting the messages linger unanswered. I strolled along, letting my thoughts wander and unfold like a tale waiting to be told. For what feels like an eternity, streets of yesteryear. I had never realized homes adorned with flaking layers of color. Once upon a time, gardens flourished with vibrant colors and fragrant blossoms, young voices echoing between the spaces of their homes. The world continued its course, unaware of the tempest that had transformed my inner landscape. Upon my arrival, I found that my husband had already returned. He sat at the kitchen table casually flipping through a magazine, though his mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts untold. I lingered in the doorway, observing him intently for what felt like an eternity. He raised his gaze, a smile spreading across his face. Once upon a time, he spoke, "Is everything all right?" I parted my lips, yet the words eluded me, hesitant to take flight. They carried a weight that demanded patience, an authenticity that resisted embellishment. "I believe there's something I should share with you," I murmured softly. His smile dimmed. He remained silent. He lingered in anticipation. The stillness that lingered felt as if it could shatter the very atmosphere surrounding us. And then he said, just above a whisper, "I already know." A sensation broke free within me. Stay calm and let go of any feelings of embarrassment. Only sadness lingers. "I never intended to cause you pain," I expressed. He nodded, yet there was a faraway look in his eyes. "I understand." He chose not to inquire further. He spoke softly. He stayed put. He lingered in silence, hands poised on the table, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air like a thick mist. Eventually, he rose to his feet, pressed a gentle kiss on my forehead, and made his way upstairs. I lingered in my spot, caught between the notion that this could be the conclusion of one chapter or the dawn of another, one that felt more subdued, maybe even more genuine, not polished but authentic. The conclusion was rather uneventful. There was an absence of a suitcase by the door, no loud exits or shattered pieces, just silence. Two souls linger amidst the remnants of a creation they once nurtured, caught in a moment of hesitation between restoration and acceptance of its demise, and I found myself in the kitchen, a solitary figure coming to terms with the fact that the most profound betrayals often arise from within. At times, they emerge from the journey of the individual you've evolved into over the years, and at times, enduring them requires acknowledging your desire for something greater, even when the destination of that journey remains a mystery.